Welcome back, 8:44. In today's College 101, we're taking a closer look at what students need once college gets back in session this fall. And whether you're paying for books, classes, or back-to-school wardrobe, you will want to budget for some savvy financial planning and credit management. Christiana Bridges is the author of the bestseller, What You Need to Know About Credit and Co-Signing. Also, your first step to credit restoration, and he jacked up my credit. She joins us now in our studio. Chris, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for having me.
This most recent book is part of a series, and there's another one coming out later this fall.
Absolutely. What you need to know about credit and bankruptcy. I'm addressing a lot of the financial hardship areas that affect people, and not only the hardship itself, but how it affects their credit. And I want people to understand that we might have a life challenge that affects our credit, but we can restore after that life challenge. And so I'm putting out these practical guides just to help people kind of get through the tough seasons in their life.
Well, let's talk about this tough season, going to college. It presents many opportunities, but it also presents some dangers in terms of how you handle your finances, not falling into great debt, and that kind of thing. And that's something that more and more students are doing, going into debt.
Absolutely. You know, unfortunately, the numbers are rising. 38% of college students have to come out of school because of financial hardships. And what I found is 84% of those students say if they had had any type of financial education before they got to school, it would have been more valuable for them to know how to manage their debt. So we're sending our kids to school with really no education or information about how to manage their finances. And so when they get to school, of course, they get teased by the credit card offers and all of this, and then they don't know what to do with it. So to them, it's free money because they don't understand that money doesn't grow on trees and plastic is not free. Right.
So let's address that first, because the credit card companies are right on campus pitching to the students, and it's very, I won't say it's easy, but it's relatively easy to put in an application and get a credit card for whatever the amount is.
Absolutely. And the card reform that was passed in 2009, and then it was reformed, actually the Card Act and reformed in 2010, was supposed to address that. It basically said now that students have to prove that they have the right income, or they have to have a co-signer if they're under 21. The problem is, just like anything, we pass great law, but it takes a bit for things to get implemented, and there is always workarounds, right? So most college students on campus, as a freshman their first week, they don't have a job.
Right.
And so we know that that's, unfortunately, though, they are still solicited. And so, they don't know. They get a T-shirt or a hat, and they think, or a box of pizza, and in turn they get a credit card.
So bottom line, and I suppose the answer varies case by case, but should a college student apply for a credit card on campus and get a credit card?
My answer would be no, unless they've already had information and education before they got to campus. And that raises me, I think parents, quite frankly, should be preparing for college at birth as far as putting money aside for savings. But during high school time is when you start to teach your children about financial management and introducing them to credit management. So when they get to school, first of all, they may have already started establishing credit to be an authorized user or some other type of strategy. But most importantly, when they get confronted with that credit card offer, they have the open dialogue to come back and talk with their parents about it, because unfortunately most kids will accept the credit card offer, run out and treat everyone to dinner, right, and run up a bunch of debt, and then they don't communicate with their parents until it's too late.
Some parents, I've heard about some parents giving their kids, as they go to college, a debit card because they feel, well, at least I can manage the amount of money that's available and all that kind of thing. Is that a good idea? Because the criticism I hear is that there's kind of a disconnect. It's not actual money. It's very easy to drain that pretty quickly.
Right. Well, that type of card, a prepaid card, is a good way to get started. It doesn't help them build credit, though, so that's a different conversation. However, you've got to start somewhere teaching your children the responsibility of, if I use this credit card, there will be a bill, and I'm going to be expected to pay at the end of the month. And that'll, of course, carry them into good financial and credit management as they become adults. So I believe that it is a great place to start. You have to know your children. I have 2 children that have gone through college, and I manage that process with them differently, depending on their level of responsibility, quite frankly.
Sure.
And so I do believe that, you have to know your children, but it's a great place to start.
And it is the parents' responsibility to start doing that. And you say during high school is the best time to do it.
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
And for the students themselves, when they get to college and this process begins, what is the key thing for them to keep in mind?
Well, if they do get in, if they do establish the credit card, and it's not a bad thing, again, if you do it with knowledge and wisdom of how to manage it, because it's a great way to start establishing credit. We know in this country, we really need to have a good credit, right? So we understand that. So I would say as a student, if you do have a credit card, make sure that as you're charging and using that credit card, you have the ability to pay it. That's the biggest thing. Know that plastic is not free. So you're going to need to be able to pay your credit card at the end of that particular month. Manage and watch your limits. I would encourage them to read the terms and conditions, clearly understand what they are obligating themselves to, so that they're not going into it blindly. So read your information, ask the questions, and know if you use it, you're going to need to pay it back.
All right, very good. Chris Bridges is an author, writes on all things financial and about keeping our houses in order. Thank you very much for coming in. Good to have you here. We do appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Following the massive security breach, Target stores now offering free credit monitoring to the customers for the next year. Starting this week, customers can sign up to get copies of their credit reports, insurance against identity theft, and daily credit monitoring. So how do you protect your credit against these massive scams? Well, joining us now to help sort it out, financial author and lecturer Chris Bridges, who also runs the Credit with Chris website. Thanks for being with us again. It's good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you too.
Let's get right to it. As far as protecting ourselves, because everybody seems to shop with some type of plastic these days, what protects us more, using a debit card or using a credit card?
Well, and I have to tell you that Target is not alone. You may have heard today that Neiman Marcus joined them.
Absolutely.
So they're in good company.
And there may be more.
There are going to be more as far as breaches are concerned. Well, there's some fundamental differences between using a debit and a credit card. They both, of course, pull from the bank accounts. And depending on the banks, there may be some guidelines depending on the limits and so forth that you can pull. But basically, the way to look at it is when you're using your debit card, you're immediately accessing the money that is in your account. However, when you're using your credit card or using the same card as a credit card, you are actually using the money against the credit that is established to you, which could also be the same money that's in the account. But it does depend on a couple of things. Number one, maybe the limits that you have access to with regards to the money that you have that the bank has given you. So when you have a fraud issue, that's a big problem, because if you're using debit, they may be able to go in and take a lot more money out of your account, which could affect the amount of time that you're able to get that money back because of the bank's requirements. So there's a big difference, not if you're just using it sort of day to day, but trying to protect yourself. You really should try to use more credit that limits your liability and limits the potential risk that you have against
And is that easier as well if somebody does get our information and use it for us to try to recoup that money so that we're not held liable for somebody else's charges that they made on our account?
Both of them, the banks, most banks, all banks, are going to be able to recover through a fraud investigation. The difference is the timing of which you get your money back and how much money they may have got access to. So that's the difference. Both of them, I mean, you can have a breach on your debit card just like you have a breach on your credit card. So unfortunately, we're not protected so much from the breach itself. It's the recovery process.
It's so tough because for so long in learning financial accountability, we said, don't run up those credit cards because that's not money that we currently have right now. But it seems like in a case like this, as long as you're careful with it and you make sure that you don't overcharge, it may protect you a little bit better in the case of something like this.
No, absolutely. And remember that even with a bank, they issue debit and credit. So it could be a card that you have from the bank that's pulling right out of your account. However, the way you use it could be different between debit and if you use it as a credit. If you go into the store, they'll ask you, do you want to use this as a debit card or a credit card? I recommend that we stay, even if we're using that type of card, that we stay on the credit side. Plus, we reduce some fees.
Does it make a difference whether we're shopping in store or online?
It could. As far as protection, though, unfortunately not. Just like we know with Neiman Marcus today being announced that they had a fraud breach. It's difficult to protect ourselves unless we don't do any shopping. And who's going to not use, plastic today? People don't use cash today. So it's really about just being more aware of where you have the liabilities and then being more careful. And again, I suggest credit.
And quickly then, what's the best way to make sure that we are not, or that we find out that something like this has happened, or to check to see if there have been breaches?
Absolutely. You've got to check your account more regularly than once a month. It used to be that you could check your,
Right.
do your reconciliation once a month. Now you should probably want to check it on a regular basis, every other day or so, just to make sure that there have been no breaches.
Well, it's an unfortunate part of life in these days.
It is.
The
We just
cards
have
are
to be
supposed to make
careful.
things more convenient, but that comes
Absolutely.
at a cost sometimes.
Absolutely.
Chris Bridges, thanks for being with us.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
it. Good
Appreciate
advice.
it. Thank you.
Allison, back to you.
Julie, thank you so much. Well, even if you regularly check your scores with the major credit rating companies, you might not have an accurate idea of your ability to borrow money to buy a home or a new car. About half of us say they don't know what FICO is. So much so I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it right. Is it FICO?
Absolutely.
FICO, F-I-C-O. But the ratings have a much bigger influence on mortgage companies or other money lenders than you might know. Joining us now is financial author Chris Bridges, founder of New Life Financial Strategies. He's also certified as a professional on all things FICO and lectures on the topic as well. You just finished a lecture not too long ago on the FICO score.
Absolutely. Actually, I have an opportunity, and I'm very thankful for it, to talk about this subject a lot.
Good.
So as a credit coach, one of my missions is to impact generations by educating and empowering people to live a better life, quite frankly, better understanding the credit system.
Right.
And so I spend much of my day having this discussion in one platform or another.
Hence the name New Life Financial Services.
Yeah, well, that's actually my nonprofit. So my
Okay.
company is named Credit with Chris.
Love it.
And so as a spinoff, so we can reach more people, we actually have a nonprofit called New Life Financial Services.
New Life. Let's talk about the fact that I think a lot of people, myself included, believe it's the big three, right? That you check and you go on there, make sure there are no, bad credit reports, or you write the letters to the big three. But the FICO score, why is this so important, and why don't more of us know about what this is?
Well, absolutely. And it's interesting you say that, because the big three are actually credit bureaus. Those are
Okay.
repositories that just report information that is being told about them by our creditors.
Like Experian and
Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion.
Okay.
However, they use scoring models. FICO, which stands for Fair Isaac Corporation, is just one of the different types of scoring models. It happens to be the most commonly used. Probably 90% of the 100 top bank and lenders use the FICO model. So it's used most prominently, but it's just one type of scoring model.
Got it.
And so what happens is our credit is derived based on the information that is being reported about us. So our credit score can change as information is, being said, good or bad.
Right.
And so what happens is they use the different models, again, FICO being the most prominent, but each credit bureau, quite frankly, has their own model. And they've come together and created one called a Vantage score that's pretty much used commonly amongst the three. But each bureau has their own model. So it makes it very kind of confusing.
It does. So I guess, Chris, then what's the bottom line here for consumers? And does it differ if you're going for a mortgage versus a new car?
Yes, it does actually.
It does,
It does,
okay.
because each industry, mortgage, lending, car, insurance even, they use different models depending on that industry. And so as a consumer, it's important for us to know, because there's no right or wrong score, there's no right or wrong model. It really depends on what they're using it for.
Okay.
And so if you want to purchase a home, then you want to be sure that you're tracking and monitoring your score based on the FICO model, because most lenders are using the FICO model. If you want to buy a car or insurance, then it may be using a different model. My recommendation is that you're just monitoring your credit on a regular basis. Now, there are hundreds of online consumer monitoring sources. The one that's going to give you the most closely related score to a lender is myfico.com. Now, I'm not promoting anything out here.
Sure, but if you want,
myfico.com.
If you go on, will it tell you the steps to basically, or any of these, the steps to get your credit together, what they're looking for? Is this where we need to go? And how far out in advance do we need to go if we're looking at maybe buying a home?
Wow, I think as soon as you think you
soon
want
as
to
you
buy a
think
home,
so.
because the worst thing is for you to get your heart and your family all excited about
Right.
a home, and you can't based on your credit worthiness.
Okay.
So as soon as you think you want to be prepared to, or you're ready to buy a home, it's a good idea to start tracking your credit. You don't want that to hold you back.
A lot to talk about. It's a big issue. I suggest you do your research.
Absolutely.
We will link your information if people have questions after this interview. We appreciate it. This is
Thank
Chris
you.
Bridges. He's financial author and also the founder. The nonprofit is New Life Financial Services. Steve, over to you.
All right, Allison, thanks so much. It is 8:22.